Ancient Greece is one of the most well-known civilisations in history. It was a major cultural force in the Mediterranean region for centuries, and its legacy can be seen in the art, literature, philosophy and politics of the modern world. When most people think about ancient Greece, they think of the towering Parthenon, the famous last stand of the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae, and probably Alexander the Great. In this video, we will explain all of ancient Greek history from the Minoans to the conquest of Greece by the Romans. So if you're brushing up for an exam or just a keen history fanatic, you've come to the right place. The location we know today as Greece is a country in southeastern Europe. However, in the Greek language, it is known as Hellas. The English name Greece comes from the Latin word Graecia, which means land of the Greeks. In the ancient world, however, there was no country known as Greece. Instead, there were hundreds of small cities in the region of modern Greece that were all separated from each other. Instead of thinking of themselves as a country, the people in this region thought of themselves as a people who were united by some common elements. These elements were the same religion, the same language, and some of the same cultural values. As a result, if a city-state worshipped the Greek gods, spoke a form of the Greek language, they were considered Hellenes. However, even though they considered themselves the same culture, these different city-states were divided and were often at war with one another. This conflict chiefly arose due to the limited natural resources of the area, which was caused by unique geographic and climatic conditions. Greece's landscape is a mix of mountains, forests, and small areas suitable for agriculture. Around 80% of the country is made up of mountains, and only a limited number of rivers cut through this rocky terrain. This means that access to these rivers and the fresh water they offered, for both drinking water and for watering crops, became a key factor in where cities could develop. Cities that could control nearby rivers as well as dominate the small strips of land to grow crops on had the greatest chance to flourish. For those cities that did not move quickly enough to seize these resources, they had to attack other Greek city-states as a way of increasing their hold over the limited resources available. Other cities, though, sought new lands across the waves. This is why the sea became the most important factor in the Greek world. You see, the Mediterranean Sea surrounds Greece. While we tend to see the ocean as a natural barrier for modern countries, the ancient Greeks saw the exact opposite. Since the landmass of Greece was so mountainous and filled with dangerous creatures, travelling over land was often slow and life-threatening. In comparison, an ancient Greek could travel much faster between locations by ship. As a result, Greek city-states appeared across the eastern Mediterranean. Therefore, when we talk about the culture of ancient Greece, not only does it include mainland Greece, but also many islands, including Crete, Rhodes and Cyprus, as well as the western coast of modern Turkey. Now that we know the high-stakes climate of the ancient Greek world, it's time to look at how this influenced the history of ancient Greece. To do that, let's go back to the very earliest Greek culture. The origin of Greek civilization actually isn't found on the Greek mainland at all. In fact, the first traces of what would later become ancient Greece is found on the island of Crete, in the middle of the eastern Mediterranean. Here, a civilization known as the Minoans flourished between 2500 and 1500 BC. During this 1,000-year period, the Minoans became a powerful cultural and economic force. One of the key factors in the success of the Minoan civilization was its enormous wealth, which was based on widespread trade and commerce. Evidence of their international trade routes have been found across the Mediterranean region, including ancient Egypt and the Near East. This wealth was spent on building vast constructions, the most famous of which was the massive palace of Knossos. First constructed around 2000 BC, it was the nerve centre of the political, economic and religious life of Minoan society. The sheer size of this complex shows how wealthy and economically powerful the Minoans were. Why the Minoans are usually discussed as a starting point of Greek history is that the very first elements of later Greek culture can be found here. The written language of the Minoans, known as Linear A, still hasn't been deciphered. However, elements of the language influence the development of the later Greek language. Also, the Minoans feature in some important Greek myths, most famously as the home of the legendary Minotaur. However, after 1500 BC, this culture went into a period of collapse. There is evidence that the palace of Knossos was finally abandoned around 1300 BC, but it's still not entirely clear why. There are several theories about the collapse of the Minoan civilization. One theory is that it was caused by a natural disaster, such as a volcanic eruption on the nearby island of Thera or Santorini. Another theory is that it was a result of military conquest by the Mycenaeans, who were a neighbouring civilization on the mainland of Greece. It could be that the collapse may have been due to a combination of internal and external factors, including economic and political instability. Either way, the next great Greek culture did come from the Greek mainland, and they were the ones who had attacked the Minoans. In around 1400 BC, the Mycenaean civilization began to develop on mainland Greece. The Mycenaean culture was clearly influenced by the earlier Minoans. They developed a similar system of writing called Linear B, which actually has been deciphered and is now considered to be the earliest form of ancient Greek. The Mycenaeans were a warlike people, and they are known for their monumental fortified cities. The great Mycenaean settlements of Sparta, Pylos, and Mycenae are still known today. They had massive defensive walls and were located away from the seacoast, almost as if they were avoiding attacks from passing ships. It is hard to overstate the importance of warfare to the Mycenaeans. Everything we see about them is focused on war. The most famous story in all of Greek history actually dates from this time, the Trojan War. In it, great individual warriors like Achilles are praised for their godlike achievements on the battlefield. For the rest of Greek history, every Greek city-state would look back on the Mycenaean heroes and turn them into demigods to be emulated in real life. However, just like the Minoans before them, the Mycenaean civilization also collapsed. Their destruction would be so catastrophic that the Greek world would take centuries to recover as it fell into a dark age. Beginning around 1100 BC, the Greek world was consumed by a wider spread collapse of civilizations across the eastern Mediterranean. This cataclysm, known as the Late Bronze Age collapse, resulted in the destruction and abandonment of almost every major Mycenaean city. There is some evidence that the Greek Dark Age was caused by invasions and migrations of other people groups into Greece, which overwhelmed the Mycenaean civilization, leading to its collapse. As a result, very little is known about what happened in Greek history after this point, as all evidence of writing disappears. This is why it is called a Dark Age. Then, 300 years later, around 800 BC, the first signs of recovery begin to appear. The Greeks eventually emerged from this period of darkness and began to rebuild their civilization. The Archaic Period is the name given to the time from around 800 to 480 BC. During this time, the Greek city-states started to re-emerge, and the development of the ancient Greek language reaches its full form. During the Archaic Period, political systems began to change. Previously, monarchies had been the most common form of government. However, during this time, city-states began to prefer oligarchic systems that allowed wealthy families to be in control of political life. The most famous city-state was Athens, which even went one step further in the late 6th century BC and allowed all male citizens to be involved in politics. This was the first version of what we call democracy. These new city-states relied heavily upon the idea of citizen warriors. This concept required all male citizens to show loyalty to their city-state of birth by training regularly together with spear and shield to help defend their homes. When a city was attacked by another, all of these citizen soldiers were expected to fight together in a phalanx formation to defeat the threat. Some cities invested more time in their citizens' training than others. It was during this time that Sparta developed its ultra-militaristic social system, for which it earned a reputation as the greatest warriors in the Greek world. Finally, a growing sense of Greek identity appeared during this time among the different cities. This developed around shared experiences like the new Olympic Games, held every 4 years. Also, at Delphi in central Greece, a shrine dedicated to the god Apollo was built. It quickly became the most famous religious site in ancient Greece, and a voice of authority that all city-states respected. As competition between the Greeks increased, the various city-states also sent out ships to found colonies around the Mediterranean. This also allowed them to reconnect with the Greek people in Asia Minor. It was here that the Greeks encountered the growing power of the largest empire in the world, the Persians. The Persian Empire was expanding rapidly and had consumed all of the Greek city-states in the region of modern Turkey. In comparison to this superpower, the Greeks were a small, disconnected region that seemed to be an easy target for the unstoppable Persian army. In 490 BC, the Persians attempted to invade Greece. But at the Battle of Marathon, the Athenians won a miraculous victory against a much larger Persian force. When the Persians prepared for a second invasion, it would be the spark for the greatest period in all of Greek history. The Classical Period is the name given to the time from around 480 to 323 BC. This is the golden age of ancient Greece. It began when the Persians invaded for a second time in 480 BC, with hundreds of thousands of soldiers. A Greek defence force led by 300 Spartans sought to hold them off at Thermopylae. While the Spartans held them off for 3 days, they were ultimately slaughtered to the last man. However, the 3-day delay bought the rest of Greece time to prepare for the Persian approach. Following Thermopylae, the Persians marched into central Greece. But at the naval battle of Salamis and the land battle of Plataea, the combined forces of many Greek city-states once more miraculously defeated the Persians. After 3 consecutive military failures, the Persians fled from Greece, never to invade again. Following the Persian defeat, there was a period of peace and prosperity. Greek culture grew dramatically due to improved finances and social stability. However, this period of cooperation and mutual support between the different Greek city-states would not last very long. Eventually, they returned to focusing on their own needs and once again saw other Greeks as threats to their own power. The city-state of Athens, which possessed a powerful navy, was able to expand its power over other Greeks by using its navy to demand submission from other city-states. Athens used their influence to establish the Delian League, a defensive alliance of many Greek cities whose stated goal was to hinder any future Persian invasions. However, Sparta was wary of the Athenian grab for dominance and established its own organisation for protection against their rivals, the Peloponnesian League. The city-states that sided with Sparta began to see Athens as a threat to peaceful cooperation between the Greeks. As the 2 power blocks grew, each was more anxious about the other. It would only take one small provocation to spark a massive war. As expected, a disagreement about allies on each side quickly developed into the greatest conflict the Greek world had ever seen, the Peloponnesian War. This war lasted from 431 to 404 BC and saw both Athens and Sparta invading the other's territories and targeting each other's allies. The scale of destruction horrified people across the Greek world, as Greeks slaughtered thousands upon thousands of other Greeks, ruining entire cities and economies. After almost 30 years of war, Athens admitted defeat and dissolved the Delian League. As a result of its victory, Sparta became the dominant power in Greece, but this was also short-lived. In 371 BC, the city-state of Thebes defeated Sparta at the Battle of Leuctra, and the Peloponnesian League was also dissolved. But decades of constant warfare between the Greeks left the region exhausted and weakened. This was the perfect time for a new power to rise up and take advantage of the situation. This new power would be located just to the north of Greece, in the region of Macedonia, and it would produce the greatest military general of the ancient world. The Hellenistic period is the name given to the time from around 323 to 31 BC, which is the period marked by the rise of Alexander the Great and his conquest of the Middle East and Central Asia. While Thebes was fighting against Sparta, the Kingdom of Macedonia was rising to power in the north of Greece. Macedon was ruled by Alexander's father, Philip II. In 338 BC, Philip II conquered almost all of the city-states in Greece and established the League of Corinth. This made Macedonia the most powerful state in Greece. In 334 BC, Alexander the Great, son of Philip II, invaded Persia. In the space of just 5 years, Alexander managed to personally defeat the Persian king in 2 major battles, leading to the conquest of the entire Persian Empire. Alexander had done the unthinkable and as a result created the largest empire in the world. He then went on to invade the regions of Afghanistan and modern Pakistan. As a result of this remarkable achievement, Greek language, culture and art spread throughout much of the known world, from Greece in the west to India in the east. No other individual had spread the religious, political and cultural ideologies of the Greek world so successfully as Alexander did in his brief 10 years in power. Unfortunately, after Alexander's death in 323 BC, the Greeks once more turned on each other rather than remaining united. Alexander's empire was immediately divided up between his leading generals, who fought with each other to try to be the most powerful leader. As a result, ancient Greece entered a 300-year period of decline during the Hellenistic period, as competing Greek kingdoms exhausted themselves trying to conquer each other. They were so focused on themselves that they had failed to notice another power threat far to the west, the Romans. The history of ancient Greece comes to a gradual end during the 2nd and 1st centuries BC. During this time, the Roman Republic fought a series of wars of expansion that gradually consumed each of the Greek kingdoms one by one. The final kingdom remaining was Egypt, which was ruled by the descendants of Ptolemy, one of the Macedonian commanders who fought with Alexander. The last Ptolemaic ruler was called Cleopatra VII, who reigned over Egypt as pharaoh. In 31 BC, the Roman Emperor Augustus defeated Cleopatra at the Battle of Actium. Following the defeat, Cleopatra committed suicide, and Egypt fell under Roman control. This finally ended Greek independence, as Rome became the dominant power in the Mediterranean. Greece was made a province of Rome until the Roman Empire itself fell 5 centuries later. While ancient Greece technically came to an end with the Roman conquest, Greek culture continued to influence the world for many centuries afterwards. The Romans adopted much of Greek art, literature, and religion, continuing to spread it throughout their empire. And even today, we can still see the influence of ancient Greece in our own culture. From art and architecture to literature and philosophy, the legacy of ancient Greece lives on. I hope you found this video helpful and informative. If you'd like to study Greek history in more detail, follow the links in the description below or visit historyskills.com. I look forward to seeing you again soon in our next video.